thank you so much for joining us here today on Europe Today. And in fact, what a morning it is. It's quite a game changer, in fact, with the dramatic killing of the Iranian supreme leader. But where is Europe here? As usual, Europe's not at the table.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. As you have seen over the weekend, there were consultations. There was the ministerial meeting yesterday, and there was a statement by High Representative Madame Kallas on behalf of the European Union member states. We are closely observing the two military operations, one Israeli and the other one by the United States. Our members were present at the meeting of the Security Council, which took place on the French initiative over the weekend. And of course, at the moment, we have all condemned the retaliation that happened from Iran vis-a-vis the Gulf countries, where targets were not only military bases, but also other facilities were not involved in any way in the operation.
And Prime Minister, are the strikes justified under international law and in your view?
Well, as we have seen, the justification that came from the United States and Israel at the meeting of the Security Councils was that the peace negotiations and the process which was going on in terms of the nuclear program was exhausted, and the fact that Israel perceives Iran and its nuclear program as the existential threat, that was obviously the reason why the operation has been undertaken, and undertaken in a sense that is not only basically destroying the nuclear program facilities or alleged nuclear program facilities or the military targets, but also basically aimed clearly towards the change of regime, which was the topic which was crystal clear for months now, if you follow closely the developments in and around Iran.
Prime Minister, is there a unified EU position on the way forward?
We shall continue consultations. I think that all the statements which were issued so far, but for maybe one or two, were very, very clear and unified. So from that perspective, I think the lead has been taken by the E3, where two member states of the European Union are participating due to the fact that they were the most involved in the talks with Iran.
Prime Minister Maria Tadeo here. Thank you again for joining us in this critical hour. I do have to ask you and insist on this point. However, we have seen that the French, the Germans, the UK really changing their tone and saying they are prepared to take defensive actions to protect their interests. Do you see Europe now becoming active in this war? And is there a point where you switch from defensive to offensive? Is that something you're considering?
Well, I think at this stage that these statements should be considered basically as a national statements. There were no decisions in that respect that were taken among the 27.
And sir, I have to ask you, you're an extremely experienced politician. Of course, you've been to many Brussels summits. You know how the machine works. Over the weekend, Ursula von der Leyen faced criticism that she was stepping too much into foreign policy and suggested at some point what appeared to be regime change in Iran, calling for a transition. Is that the kind of language you expect from the Commission, or would you say at this point it's the capitals and leaders like yourself who are in charge and should stay in charge?
Well, I think in the dynamics of the contemporary international relations, foreign policy, tectonic changes in the world, I don't think it's a matter of institutional turf battling. It's the matter of political messaging, which is basically happening, and the fact that Commission plays an important role within the institutional architecture does not surprise me. That also the President of the Commission made comments regarding the situation in Iran. I don't think we will go back to the times where things were more peaceful. I think in these situations, everybody reacts more abruptly than usual.
So, hands on deck. And Prime Minister, if we were to ask you, would you say regime change is now the way forward for Iran? Is that something that at this stage would be justified and your country, Croatia, could support?
When it comes to the situation in Iran, I think that over the weekend there were, I would say, substantial change of circumstances given the fatalities that occurred early Saturday morning and throughout Saturday and Sunday. So I think with the whole pressure that exists from outside and also from within Iran, because we saw very diversified reactions on these actions. Some were mourning and some were cheering. So I think given the complexity, the size, and I would say the longevity of the current regime, it is very difficult to assess from outside what would be the dynamics internally when it comes to the potential change of regime. I think we would have to be prudent for a while.
So be prudent. And I want to switch gears to the energy because, of course, markets, as we see now, are preparing for volatility in the energy market. And, of course, Croatia is now at the center of an energy story in Europe as a result of the damage to the Druzhba pipeline. Some look at Croatia as a facilitator in this crisis. Is that something that you would consider now? Any way that you could step in when it comes to the Druzhba pipeline, especially if we see more volatility in the energy market? And have you had any conversations with Prime Minister Viktor Orban on this issue in the past 48 hours?
Well, first of all, I was in Kyiv last week at the occasion of the 4th anniversary of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And in my talks with both President Zelensky and Prime Minister Sviridenko, I was clearly presented with evidence how the Druzhba pipeline was hit and damaged. And this, what was presented in our view, seemed as a substantive damage which was caused by Russian attacks on Ukraine. Throughout the war that Russia wages against Ukraine, Croatia's position vis-à-vis Hungary, vis-à-vis Slovakia, repeated at multiple occasions vis-à-vis all the European partners, the European institutions, the Commission, was that the Adriatic pipeline, which is the pipeline that actually serves the neighboring countries, and that are Hungary, Slovakia, and Serbia, has full capacity, not only to be, as Hungary used to say over the past few years, as an alternative or secondary or subsidiary pipeline, but it can serve as the primary pipeline for our landlocked neighbors, partners, and friends. That is to say, to provide enough crude oil that would come to Croatia's port of Omišalj and then be transported to Sasalombata, which is the refinery in Hungary, or Bratislava refinery, in the amount, if needed, the entire full capacity of these two refineries, which is 14 million tons a year, plus 9 million tons to Serbia, where the oil industry of Serbia has its refinery in Pančevo. So the point of the Adriatic pipeline is one. It is, first of all, it can be primary, it is reliable, and it has full capacity and does not have issue of the transportation fees and costs. It is, in our assessment, 3 times cheaper when it comes to the transportation fee than Druzhba.
Okay, Prime Minister Plenković, thank you so much for taking time out of your Monday morning to speak to us here live on Europe Today on Euronews.